Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Rebuild podcast. It's Beth Barodi here with my co-host Carmen Turner, and we have a very special guest all the way from the UK with us today. Lucy Donald is joining us, and I'm really excited to be jumping into her story with you all. While we get started, I'm going to do a classic read of Lucy's bio and then give it over to her to share anything else that she would like to share with us. But Lucy and I met about a month and a half ago, and I think our connection was just instant as we were sharing stories back and forth about our careers and about the rebuilds that we have both been going through over the last few years. And immediately, once we wrapped up our conversation, I said, Lucy, you've got to come on the rebuild and you've got to share this story with us all. And so before I send it over to you, I'm just going to do a quick little intro. So Lucy Donald holds a BA in English and Linguistics from the University of Leeds and initially started her career within the media industry, working for reputable broadcasting companies such as the BBC and ITV. She started working within the international search and selection sector in 2006, of which she operated solely within the global mining sector since 2009. She was one of the co-founders of the multi-award-winning global workforce solutions company, offering services within the mining, oil and gas, renewables, construction, and maritime sectors, employing over 80 employees globally. She is also the founder of their global mining division, where she established and managed a successful international mining search and recruitment firm from scratch, going on to place over 1,000 mining professionals worldwide between 2009 and 2021. She's a proud member of Women in Mining and as well as the Oxford Mining Club. And she launched Donald Pearson Associates with a vision to create a consultancy synonymous with quality and expertise, ensuring that integrity is part of the heart of everything that they do. So Lucy, welcome to the rebuild.
Thank you so much. I love that introduction. Anyone would have thought I wrote that bio.
Isn't it amazing when you hear other people read your bio? You're like, wow, I'm actually really impressive and I've done some pretty cool things. And it just has a different feel when someone else reads it for you.
It does. So thank you for that. Thank you. And it's a pleasure to join two powerful women. It's very inspirational. I'm very excited. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. I think, Carmen, you are just meeting Lucy during this podcast, and I'm really excited for you two to also meet and for our conversation to happen. And I think as we have continued recording these episodes and we've had guests come on sharing their rebuild stories, and we've just been able to share and normalize what rebuilds are more and more, particularly among women. One of the things that keeps playing in my mind is this idea that rebuilds can come with a lot of hardship. They can come with a lot of shock. They can kind of happen to us where we need to decide how we show up in those moments. But there's also a lot of intentionality around those moments when we rebuild and a lot of opportunity for us to shape how we want to see things on the other side and how we want to build things. And so when I had initially heard Lucy share with me about her career progression and all of the work that she's done and launching of DPA, I thought, this really works well with this thought that's been kind of going on in my brain about what does it look like when we put that intentionality behind our rebuilds and where we go and what we can achieve through that. And so, well, before Lucy, I open it up to your story. Carmen, is there anything that you want to share or add before we hear from Lucy?
I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And just the thought of with the rebuild, what you're saying, Beth, with intentionality, it takes it takes some visionaries as well to be able to understand that where we want to go is different from where we are today, and people may not always be on board. They won't be. So I'm reading Bob Iger's book, The CEO of Disney. It's an incredible read about how he completely transformed the book or the company. And it really was him who was able to see differently. The past is done. We can't change the past, but where are we going from here? Like, let's stop talking about the problems of the past. Let's let that inform us. But where do we want to go from here? And then mobilizing people around you and your team, like that is the true idea of a leader. And it's the true steps when you're taking a pivot too, is changing that where you want to go.
I'm taking this course right now, and it's called a group called the 51 Movement. They're based here in Canada, and they are the largest women's VC fund in Canada. And they do a lot of education for women around investment and learning opportunities. And this past week, the founder of that, she came on and she was chatting with us, and someone asked her, what do you look for when you're looking for leaders and you're looking for investment and you're looking at kind of startups? And she said, I look for someone who believes in a vision of the future that isn't here yet and has that conviction for it. And I wrote it down. I just had to find it in my notebook because I wrote that down and I was like, that is powerful right there. And that's exactly what we need and what we need to move forward. So, Lucy, I'd love for you to take us away and start sharing with us about your story and where you're at right now.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, again, thank you for that intro. And I guess there's a few other things that I'd sort of add to that, which I can bring to life later, which is significant to my story. So, personally as well, I'm a mum of two. So to Alfie 8 and Maya 4, which is like, in a multitude of identity, that's my first and primary identity. But I'm also 2 years sober. And I think that's important because that is a huge part of my rebuild process. Huge, 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 huge. And I will be touching upon that as well. Not just professionally, but, personally and emotionally, everything, every walk of life. And also I'm next year I qualify also as a life and executive coach as well. So I think this is significant because I feel like in order to want to do that, you have to believe in the power of change. No one, but the basis of coaching, as you'll know, Carmen, is that no one's broken. Everyone has the resources within them to a brighter tomorrow. So it's that visionary, that's future, and it's you can be the change agent. And I think that reflecting upon the rebuild period, which I feel in my life, it spans over really an 8-year period. And I say 8 years because I feel like becoming a mother was the beginning of it. So I'm sure many of you can, relate to that. But, it's only now that we're really talking about the actual terminology of becoming a mother, matrescence. It's actually something that we don't talk about. And it's only the likes of trailblazers like my dear friend, university friend, Zoe Blaski, who's made an internationally acclaimed podcast on the subject and a Sunday Times bestseller on matrescence, which is a transformation. We're never the same person when we become a mum, and it's very similar to adolescence. And that in itself is a rebuild period, I think. We're never the same woman once we become a mother, and that's okay. That's a beautiful honor to become a mother. My journey really started then because so much change happens there that is out of your control. It's one hot mess. Beautiful hot mess, isn't it, becoming a mother?
I mean, that's true. That is the reality of motherhood right there.
Yeah. And I think it changed me as a person also, that then manifested into my professional life, like the compassion that you have to give yourself and the reparenting that goes through it is a very time for self-awareness and reflection. But if I really reflect on my last 8 years, I'd say like there was a really difficult 3 years, which has really been the catalyst of some of my change. And 2018 to 2021 was a challenging time. So I'd not long gone back to work from my first maternity leave. Full-time working mum, breadwinner, into a very demanding role. But in 2018, we lost my husband's brother, 35-year-old, to a brain tumor. Also, at the same time, my niece was born with a congenital heart block. We didn't know whether she was going to make it. So this was like a really emotionally traumatic period in our life. And, you throw into that as well that, I was working, I was overworked. I was working I think in 2019, I worked out that I'd traveled to Australia, South Africa, Serbia, Kazakhstan, France, all part of that comes with the territory of the role. But I was overworked, riddled with anxiety, undiagnosed ADHD, drinking every day just to sort of numb it all out, and then trying to have no time for myself or play because it was work, support, and mother. So I think we find ourselves in situations where we're just completely, it was survival mode, guys. It wasn't, that's the best way to describe it. So in this period as well, like I found myself in an environment that made me really, really quite ill as well. So I was at the beginning of 2020, I was having a number of panic attacks, high blood pressure, and I was only 11 weeks pregnant also with my little baby girl. So I went to my doctor and she was like, Lucy, if you don't make a change, this could impact the health of your baby. And, you know, it was only then that I gave myself permission to make a change. Only then. Like, and I really want to linger on that word permission, because I don't know about you guys, but I feel like as women, we sometimes have to seek permission before we make a change. And my mental health wasn't enough, but I felt like I could justify making a change when it came to my unborn baby. And do you know what? I am so grateful that the conditions had got untenable, so acute, that I did make a change, because I wouldn't have otherwise, you know? And I'm so grateful for that period in my life that was so difficult. And as a result, it forced me to set up my own company, DPA, which has been more than I could imagine. You know, the clients that have continued to work with me, many over a decade now, and it's beyond my expectations now, 3 years into the journey. So I think that was such a huge point for me to make that change. And then I started looking at other areas of my life, and, you know, other areas where maybe like the pain wasn't as acute, it was more chronic. So like it was more compounded stress and, you know, not excruciating enough to treat immediately, but still having an impact on my life. And I feel like being bold enough to make that change from, you know, initially, I was like, it's almost like a domino effect. Where else in my life warrants a change, needs a change? And that's kind of where I landed on with my pursuit to fully abstain from alcohol and become sober. So yeah.
That's big. I mean, first, congratulations on 2 years sober. That's really phenomenal. And I will say that is a hard thing to do for anyone. And I think when you have the pressure of working in the mining industry, it becomes even harder because alcohol is such a key part of networking, of events, of being, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And it's really hard to say no to it because, especially being a woman, because there's all sorts of immediate assumptions. If you say no to alcohol, it's like, oh, you're pregnant, or oh, you can't keep up with the boys, or oh, if you drink too much, then you're a lush. Like there's so much around it,
Oh my
but
God,
it's so important to the industry to have all the time. And so 2 years sober while doing your job in this industry, like I applaud you for that, because that is very tough and you should be incredibly proud of that.
Thank you. And you just literally, it's like you're in my head. Like there's some relationships that I built that I'm still like so grateful to have in my professional life, that I built around networking and around a drink. And it was like this cloak of confidence that I had, that I felt I had to have a drink to show up as the extrovert, the person that you'd want to do business with. But actually, for me, my relationship with drinking, binge drinking in particular, was just doing the complete opposite. I was riddled with anxiety, this continuous cycle of shame. And it just got to the point where I was just so sick of my own bullshit, that I decided to make a change. And that change has been so integral now to the inner confidence and some of the things that I know I would not be doing if it wasn't a result of that. So I think sometimes when you're immersed in these situations, like you've got to kind of just reflect upon it. And it's hard at the time, but see it as all part of the process and all part of the growth, you know? And I'm super grateful for that, because I wouldn't be doing this right now, for instance, if I hadn't gone sober. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
100%. Yeah. How did you, I have so many questions. I'm trying to think of the best way, but I just can resonate so deeply with, it's like we have this sense of security of a job where being a major contributor to the household income or primary contributor. And so it's like this false sense of security, perhaps in having a job, but then like that combination of that and overworking and the anxiety, like how did you shift and create the pivot to the point where you believed in yourself enough to go and start your own company, knowing that as an expert in this area and the field and the relationships that you've built, you've had that all along. Like you've always had it within you, but then transitioning to like, actually, I can do this on my own.
You know what? That's such a profound question. And I think that when I think about burnout isn't like the hours that you work. I think it's when you're not aligned to the people or the goals. So for me, like the actual job itself lit me up and the relationships I had, it was just time for me to make a change. So I always knew, because I'd always been like a top performer within the company. I was one of 5 people that grew that company from 0 to 60 million. You know, it was just us in a small office, South Manchester. And by the time I left, we had offices around the world. So I think deep down, I knew that I could do it. And that had been demonstrated, proven track record of doing it. But again, this self-doubt kept me there until I was forced to make a change. So I feel like when it comes to change, there's 2 ways. Like a lot of the time you're either forced to, which I feel like I was, or you're a change agent. And both are daunting experiences, because we know, don't we, the amygdala, the part of the brain that perceives threat, will always try and keep us even in the discomfort of the known, because at least it's predictable rather than the unknown. But in this instance, I was forced for my health. But I think I always had that underriding confidence from a proven track record of delivering that I could do it. And I needed that. It was like the universe is going, do it, because you won't bloom and leave otherwise. Do it.
I had I had a similar experience with when I had my first son, where it was like all of those hardships forced me to leave a situation that was really bad for me that I never would have left otherwise. And it is that acuteness that it's like, it's almost like you're getting all of these signs along the way. And it's like, I'm going to ignore it. I'm going to ignore it. I'm going to keep pushing, going to keep going until it's like, so like, it's impossible to ignore now. And now you have to make those changes. And I think one of the things that we're seeing in the second season of The Rebuild, especially with the guests that we're having on, these themes coming up with women, where I think in one of our previous episodes, we said almost exactly that about burnout. Carmen made such a good point that it's not the hours worked, it's the energy at which you are putting in. It's the commitment and alignment to which you're putting into things. And if that's off, that has such severe effects, and women feel that. And then coupled with that, we're seeing all of these great women who are now doing and building their own things because we like hard work. We are incredible leaders. We can see the potential for change. We're visionaries in this sense. And I think that in itself is going back to when you said, you know, you had to have permission, like you finally had permission to be able to make this change. We're seeing women be bolder about that. And we're seeing women step into that permission and give themselves permission far more now, I think. And the more that we talk about this, the more examples we can give, the more women can see themselves in these conversations. I think it's just going to be a tidal wave of change and movement that women are going to bring forward. So it is just these themes we just keep hearing from our guests.
It is. And like, again, I think if we are always looking for permission, we're silencing our inner intuition, and we're not listening to our visceral reaction to a situation, which in my case was, you know, panic attacks, anxiety, sleepless nights. Yeah, like we need to listen to that before it gets to that point. But we can only do that if we're more vocal of our journey and our experience, and also like providing hope to other women going through this, saying, honey, I totally understand, we've been there, done that, learn from my mistakes, tap out before you get to that point of burnout, because it is a lot harder when you get to that point to rebuild.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to build on what Beth was saying, what I meant by like the energy behind that leads to burnout is often from scarcity, from I'm not good enough, from what if I don't get, you know, all of the, when you question yourself and you're trying to attain this external expectation of you, rather than I've got like true alignment, I am enough, I've got this, there's something deeper within me. I don't need to, outsource and ask people for permission and see if that what they think. I know the answers. I have everything within me already. And then when that shifts, that's when you can really, burnout it's not about burnout at that point.
I think as well, like Carmen's story with her rebuilds as well is somewhat similar to yours with the health challenges that she also faced, and that she went through, that again got down to that like acute level of you now have to listen and you have no choice. And Carmen, I don't know if you're willing to share or just elaborate a bit more on that for Lucy and share your experience.
Yeah. So my background is in corporate sustainability and ESG. I have a master's degree in sustainability leadership. And so for over 20 years, been working in this space. And so was very lucky in being able to work with one of Canada's largest mining companies right from the beginning, first person with sustainability in my title, and always from a perspective of real transformational change to what we're seeing today, where companies talking about net zero and the move to complete transformation. But if you can imagine, like in 2006, like very difficult conversations to have. So I was leading that burden of being the change maker in an organization and having difficult conversations, like testing a field that did not have a history and did not have a lot of, frankly, credibility in the industry. But a lot of people were feeling the same way. And so having that burden of building something new, creating a better vision, and always having to justify my role, justify what we were doing, pushing back to very difficult personalities, eventually led me to developing an autoimmune disease. And so when that happened, it pushed me over to really look at taking care of myself first and understanding how I got there, and what I needed to do to take care of myself, but also start listening to what I'd already known, which was you are right. You're going in the right direction. You have it within you. You don't have to do anything extra to prove anything, but it's about like listening to yourself and that inner guidance.
And within that time, she also had two children. So she had two maternity leaves that she went off on. And I think all of us can confidently say those returns are not, we do not successfully bring women back into the workforce, particularly in the mining sector right now. And just touching Lucy on that piece of you are a different woman after you have children. That's very true. And when you come back into your roles, you are expected to be the same person with the same capacity and the same attention and energy to give to the role that you left to go and have your child. And it's just not the reality. Like I remember, so my daughter is 10 and a half months old, and she was an IVF baby. And so I remember when I first even brought it up to the COO of the previous company that I worked for, when he was in that role, I remember the first conversation I had with him after hiding this for 6 years that I was going through fertility treatment. And I said, I need to stop traveling for 2 weeks. I just need 2 weeks off because I need to go to the clinic. I'm going through this. And the first thing out of his mouth was, I have someone who can take over your role for when that happens. He's a guy I worked with at my previous job. He'll be great for you. You'll learn so much from him, but I can touch base with him and I can have him start talking to you now so that we can prepare. And first, to tell any woman that when they're bringing forward anything around family planning, completely inappropriate. Second, the fact that I was bringing this up with so much unknown from a woman who had been in fertility treatments for 6 years at that point. And there's every unknown to that. There was, you can't just be overly optimistic about it. It eats away at you. And so it was like, even telling me that when I didn't even know if this was going to be successful. And that wasn't, that whole protocol ended up getting canceled because I had uterine polyps that showed up and I needed to go and get surgery and all of these sorts of things. And so it ended up like not being the right thing, but it put it in his mind that I'm trying to get pregnant. And from that moment on, I was just treated as, well, you're going to go off at some point and I'm going to bring in someone else. And I found out that he had brought this guy in to do due diligence projects. He was working with him on the side, outside of what my role was. Like all of these things were happening. And it was very much, again, when leaving that role, it was when I found out had a viable pregnancy with my daughter. I was also around 12 weeks pregnant, and it was like, I can't take this stress on my body anymore. Like, this is too important, and this is it. And I think even after having my son, I remember those moments of just feeling like I am different. I am a different person. I care about different things. And bringing that to the workforce in a different way was actually incredibly powerful and incredibly, like, it was very amazing. But even at that time, I had to go into my own consulting before I landed at a full-time job again, because it was just too different than what the expectations were of people wanting around me. So I think, all three of us can certainly relate to that whole piece of those moments and those maternity leaves and those when you have children. And as a woman, how do you then show up in the workforce? Those are very profound moments for us, and pivotal moments in our lives.
They are. And I think like there's so much to touch upon there. Like, first of all, I think we're the first generation of women where we were told we could have it all, which is quite frankly not the case. When you say yes to something, you say no to something else, right? End of. But like, we were the generation where you're pushed where you can be a mother and still go and get a career. And that's all very well if you have the perfect conditions and the support at home to do that, and in the workplace and in the sector. And I just don't think that we're there yet. I'm yet to find a woman that feels like she's absolutely crushing every part of their life. And again, I do keep referring to my friend Zoe Blaskley, because she is a change agent. She's a trailblazer, started a movement about talking about being a modern day mother, through her podcasts and her books. And she always says, like, she's just on a mission to get rid of that mum guilt, which we've all felt, I'm sure. We're either not doing enough in work or we're not doing enough at home. And she said, hang on a minute, guilt, it's the 80-20 rule. And she's like, is what I'm feeling now, because she's like, guilt is actually if it's going against my values, or am I guilty because I'm being told to be guilty? Because if it's genuinely going against my values, which is providing for my family, which is being ambitious and having goals, then no, I should not feel guilt. And it's a mission that I think that we need to empower women on.
Well, I think that this whole notion of women can have it all is like this PR campaign predominantly from men to be like, why aren't you happy? You're in the workforce, you can be a mother, you can do everything. Why aren't you happy? You've got everything you've ever wanted. And it's like, no, we haven't. And the amount of times that I'm like, well, men are already doing it. Men can be fathers and can work and they do it. It's like, let's be real here about what those differences are and how that is. And it's not that I get so frustrated when people talk about feminism and women's rights that it's just like it has to be the exact same. The picture of it has to be the exact same as men, where it's like, that is not what feminism is. Feminism is like equal opportunities and recognizing there are differences between men and women, and we should still be able to have equal opportunities and equal say in what that looks like. And I think we now kind of have to be undoing this, we can have it all, or looking at it from like, if we have it all, what do we need to change to ensure that we are healthy and thriving while having it all? What do work hours look like? What does childcare look like? What does home life look like? What does our mental health look like? And actually reshape that, and then have industry follow for what's expected of women coming back into the workforce, or just being parents in general, and that burden that they hold.
Yeah, completely.
I just remembered too, like, I wish so much that I'd had a network back then, because I really felt alone. Like, there were a couple of other working moms, but they were part-time. But the majority of people, the company had started hiring like younger people who didn't have families, who were in that phase in their career where they could just, just work and work and work, and they didn't have any other responsibility. And then, there wasn't anyone above me either who also was, a working mom. They were women, but they were acting more like traditional men rather, and they didn't have families. So there was nothing for me to aspire to and look up to. And then the exhaustion of having to explain why it was that I wasn't like those 24-year-olds, arriving at the office at 7:45 and staying until 6:30, 7:30, 8:30 at night, like I used to, because I had to explain why. And It's like the burden that you carry, we shouldn't have to explain why.
Presenteeism. You're like, it should be about being present rather than presenteeism. And to your point, it's so important that we have representation now of working mums. And I know from like my coaching as well, when we ask people the question why, it forces us to justify, and we shouldn't have to justify that. We shouldn't have to justify, as long as like we should be rated on our productivity. And I tell you, there's nothing like a working mum's productivity, right? We're not there to talk around the water cooler. We're there to get results in the limited time we've got so that we can then go home and be mum. Yeah, I think you're so right. We need more representation.
So, Lucy, how do you pull that into the work that you're doing with DPA then? Because now you get to kind of build this movement for yourself with all of the expertise that you have and your own experiences and these sorts of things. So, how do you bring that into the work that you're doing with DPA now?
Amazing question, and one that is going to be slow, but I'm on a very intentional drive now to use my voice through the fact that I've got my own platform now and podcast. And I've got to the point now where I feel like I have got some respect with some esteemed business leaders, whereby it's almost like I'm having conversations behind closed doors like this that are very important, that I'm bringing it to the table of these decision making and these executives when it comes to not just recruitment or talent acquisition, but talent retention. I think we spoke, didn't we? And there was an example very, very recently whereby I was onboarding or I had an offer for, again, a mother who'd just returned to the workplace. She was still breastfeeding. And it goes back to the unknown. So she was in an environment which was so refreshing to hear, that was so supportive of her being a new mom, breastfeeding into a very, very senior role within the organization. And I managed to get her an offer that was like $100,000 more than she was currently on, flexible working conditions. But she just said, I just can't risk the move to the unknown, whether that company is going to offer that flexibility. And here's the problem. So great, she stayed where she is, but there was an opportunity to progress, promotion, more money. But I just don't think she could believe that this was a reality in another company. So then there's a educational piece to talk to my clients and to be like, great cultures attract great people. So let's showcase that. Let's showcase, if we're practicing innovation as one of our values in the technology we're offering in the mining sector, why are we not reflecting that in our hiring process and how we treat our, especially millennial leaders, where that is more value than a paycheck and the other perks?
There is a positive story to share in line with that. There is a mining company that's based, their headquarters is in Toronto. And during PDAC this past year in 2024, I came in, I was 8 weeks postpartum with my daughter, and I came in to host the Femina dinner. We have our signature event during PDAC. And so I wasn't missing it. I was coming, but I was equally pumping at the same time. And I needed to be pumping every 2.5 hours. And so I, pumped on the train into Toronto, in the bathroom of the train. I pumped in my car. I pumped in a public bathroom. And then we were doing all of this filming where a lot of our members were doing interviews, and we had been able to use an office space for one of the mining companies downtown. They opened it up for us. And I came in, and the head of their HR, she came and she said, I know that you're pumping. I know this woman really well. And she had actually implemented a full breastfeeding and pumping room in their office. And it was amazing. And she said, we have it all set up. We know that you're going to need a private room to pump. We have an area for you to put your milk until you need to transfer it home so that it doesn't spoil and it stays cool. And it was this whole private area that they've set up in their office to welcome young moms back, because they had moms in their employee base in the Toronto office that needed it. And it was just I couldn't believe it when I saw it. I wasn't just put into a closet somewhere. I wasn't just told to go and sit on the toilet in a stall in their shared bathroom and pump for 20 minutes. They actually had this whole room and this whole thing. And so it's those little things and those leaders who have the opportunity to make that impact and to put that into place that will make the world of difference for women to feel like they can show up at work and participate in work on all fronts, regardless of what phase of parenthood that you are in. And I just, I try and tell that story as much as possible because it may be a seemingly small or obvious thing, but it's so impactful. And it's so exactly that. It's creating workplaces that people actually believe are going to be safe for them to come and work.
Isn't it staggering that you were treated like a human being, as you should be?
Yes.
Which I don't want to sound negative, but it should.
It's totally true. It should be the norm. It shouldn't be the exception.
But progressive, because if the other end of the spectrum was a cupboard, it's progressive, like more of that, as you said.
Yeah, absolutely.
So see, what do you think, and I think you were getting to this, what do you think is like the extra value add that you bring to the table through your company? Because you've seen how other firms have done it, but now you're creating like a new niche and extra value add that others don't see. So like, I guess the vision that you see that others don't see.
Vision that I see that others don't see. Well, I think it is,
I guess, like more of like what would set you apart, do you think?
Yeah, and it's funny because I'm going through a bit of a rebrand at the minute and what are my substantiators there. And I think it came down to my values, which is, that human touch. And I'm always based on integrity. So I'm not just going to place somebody because it's a box ticking exercise, or I'm placing someone for whose values are aligned to theirs. Again, going back to that, great cultures attract great people. And I think we need to put just as much onus on the person as we do their skill set. And it sounds very, very, very woo-woo and wishy-washy, but I'd like to think that I'm a very good judge of character when it comes to that emotional intelligence that people bring. And I just think that modern day leaders now, we need empathetic leaders because, I'm very passionate about putting the right people within the organizations, especially in developing countries that I'm very, very much working with in the likes of the African continent, whereby the right people and the right leaders don't just have an impact on the company itself. It's beyond that. It's the community. And if we are really advocating true leadership by the true sense of leadership, so it's empathetic leaders, it's people that are going to use the voice, that are value driven, leadership where people want to follow you. That's what leadership is in my eyes. That then offers a blueprint that then translates into the communities in these emerging markets too. And that's I would say my differentiator. A lot of my companies I've been working with for over a decade now, and I'd like to think it is because it's that humanistic approach.
I don't think that sounds woo-woo at all. I think it sounds human. I think we forget that leaders are human, and we forget that people need to have humans to look up to and to do that, and that human nature. Why we decided that removing humanity from leadership was the right thing to do is so beyond me, because it's what we crave and what we want to connect with completely. So I think that is an immense value add that you bring to the table and bring to this market for sure.
Thank you. And, like the likes of NASA as well have done tests before and shown the importance of emotional intelligence when you're hiring people, especially in like arduous conditions like mine sites in Africa, where you're there for like 6 weeks at a time. It's so important that you're putting the right people in there with the emotional skills and intelligence so that there's going to be a connection and they're going to gel, because we know all the things about the bad apple effect and things. And what it really came down to with the likes of NASA when they did the litmus test, I think it was, is they could see that people were able to sort of fake the emotional intelligence, and it was having massive impacts when they were going up into like building space places in confined spaces for 6 months. And what it came down to was how the people would laugh as well, and whether they had a desire or an impetus to connect with the people. And it came down to something so small in their interviews, but they were able to create the right people. Maybe not on paper they were the best astronauts, but they were the best because of their emotional intelligence.
Oh, that's amazing. I think that's a great spot to kind of wrap up with and leave with. And I think there's been so much more than I thought we would cover. And I just thank you so much for your openness and your vulnerability and sharing your journey and talking about your sobriety and talking about motherhood and all of those things and how that shapes what you're doing now. I think that is so powerful. So thank you so much, Lucy, for joining us and for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's really lit me up and started my Friday on an absolute high. So thank you.
Amazing. Well, until next time, thank you everyone for listening, and we will chat with you again soon.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.